Welcome to a special Saturday edition of Daily Dose, and we're back in manuscripts. I'm very excited to do a two-part series on one of the more famous manuscripts of the Greek Old Testament, Papyrus 967. It's going to be a lot of fun. In this video, we'll focus on some of its background and some excerpts from Daniel, and in the second video, we'll take a look at Ezekiel. What is this papyrus? Well, it was discovered in Egypt. It's not 100% clear where, although there are some theories about its original provenance, and it dates to the late 2nd or early 3rd century AD, which makes it one of the earliest copies of the Greek Old Testament for these particular books. We'll get to that in a second. Originally, the codex was something like 230 total pages. And it is a pre-Theodosian copy. This is very, very important for Daniel. It's one of the main witnesses to the Old Greek of Daniel. We'll get into some of that here in a bit. So it is tremendously important to the study of specifically Ezekiel and Daniel. Let's talk a little bit about the history. So from Egypt, after it was discovered and sort of circulated around in the antiquities market, but again, we're not 100% sure exactly what transpired. In the 1930s to the 1950s, based on how it came to market and so forth, it was ultimately spread out to 5 different holding locations today. So a big chunk of it is in Dublin, Ireland. A portion is in Princeton over here in New Jersey. Some of it is in Cologne, Germany, or Köln. Part of it is in Madrid, and part of it is in Montserrat, sort of slightly south of Spain. Little bits and pieces scattered everywhere as it made its way to market. Sadly, it's not put in one place, but it is broken up in different places. You can find images from most of this online. I'll put some links in a future video. It's a little bit tricky to track them all down, but most of them are available. And it's a pretty standard script, and it's on papyrus, as you can tell. Fairly normal kind of Alexandrian majuscule script from that era. But when we take a look at full pages, one of the notable things about it is its dimensions. It's very tall and very narrow. So the full height of existing full pages is over a foot in height, but it's only 5 inches wide. And so that makes it pretty unusual in terms of how books were constructed in this time period. You would tend to find them to be a little bit squarish, but you can see there's some page numbers if they exist. But in terms of the rest of the fragments, some of them we only have the bottom, as you can see. Some we might actually retain some of the original binding, or at least where it would have been bound. The binding, of course, is gone, but you can see that in the middle. And these are actually just sort of in the middle of a fold, if you will, a folio, and sometimes we have the top. And it depends on which holding library you're talking about. Notice if you have the top, sometimes you'll have those page numbers. And so this is the kind of state of the question. Depending on which collection you're looking at, they might have whole pages or they might just have bits and pieces. In terms of the contents, as mentioned already, it's chiefly Ezekiel and Daniel, and largely intact for those 2 books. But it also includes, quite famously, Bel and the Dragon and Susanna, the two main Greek additions to Daniel, also in a slightly different order than what you typically find. Immediately following Susanna is the book of Esther, and you actually have at the end of the full Daniel corpus, you have this little Daniel here at the bottom, and this is right before Esther begins, and a little note, peace to the one who wrote and to those who read, amen, and then it continues with Esther. So there's some debate about whether perhaps the scribe has put Susanna and Esther, in a sense, together as, if you will, female protagonists. So the contents of this manuscript are quite interesting. The existing portion of Esther is quite sparse in terms of what survived. But that is what, at least so far as we can tell, constituted the original codex. Now, if we compare a section from Ezekiel and a section from the expanded version of Daniel plus Esther, every scholar pretty much agrees that the scribe for Ezekiel, as you can tell, with that thicker stylus approach here in terms of the thickness of the lines and so forth, the ductus, if you will, is different than that of Daniel. That's pretty clear just on visual inspection that there were 2 scribes involved. One who did Ezekiel, one who did Daniel, and the rest of it. And so it was put together in one codex at a later point. Now, what we're going to do is spend a few minutes taking a look at a portion of Daniel. Some of the images are a bit slanted, so let's rotate it so it's nice and easy to follow. And we're going to just do 2 verses from Daniel chapter 7, verse 12, and the very famous verse 13. So let's dig in. Let's do some reading. We're going to pick up on this line here. So pretty easy to follow that this is Kai. So far, that's not too bad. Tous, there's your accusative plural masculine article. Remember that lunate sigma there. Upsilon is often unfamiliar if we're not used to it. Then we have kuklo. That means to be around. It's kind of where we get like circle and so forth from. Typically, you'll have a iota subscript under this omega. Of course, at this stage in the paleography, you don't typically see that. Sometimes you see it adscript written out to the side, but you don't for this scribe. And then this is an autos form. It's hard to tell because it breaks off over here, but this would be autou. So the ones who are around him. So far, so good. And then we pick up on the next line, apestasin. And so their A here is a little bit funny. It's very loopy. Then a PE, then an S plus a T, kind of ligature together, if you will. An eta, a sigma, E, and N from apostemi. And then you have tes, your article there. And then you could probably figure this out based on your Greek 1 vocab. This is a form of exousia. Happens to be the genitive singular feminine form. So he took away the authority, and the he here, the autou, is the Ancient of Days. But we find out that it's auton, it's their authority, referring to the beasts that have emerged in Daniel 7. And then we have Kai, Chronos. And then you can barely make it out, but you can see a zeta, omega. There's an eta here and a sigma at the end, but again, it's starting to break off. And time of life, chronos zoes. And then you have on the next line an E, delta, omicron, theta, and an eta. So edothe, was given, and then autois, your dative plural, was given to them. So a time of life was given to them. Then we have heos, until, here's another kairu here, until a time. And then we have kai, chronu, until a time and time, or until a sort of, I guess you have a season and time here. And so if you know Daniel, he's got this whole way in which he's playing with the words for time and half a time and all that kind of stuff. So Daniel 7:12, just kind of getting our feet wet with the handwriting, is describing how the Ancient of Days is removing the authority for those who are in opposition to him, these present empires, as Daniel finds out later in Daniel 7, these kings of the earth. He's taken away their authority, but he's giving them a certain time, a certain realm of jurisdiction, if you will, for a set season, and then we're going to see what's going to happen later on in Daniel 7. But so that's Daniel 7:12. Let's now turn our attention to verse 13, and we left off with the chrono here, so we're going to pick up with epsilon, theta, E, omega, R-O-U-N, so etheirun. So I was seeing or beholding. Next line in here, you can make out that E. It's a little bit broken off. In horamati. You can see the O, rho, A-M-A-T-I. So horamati in the vision. Tes, so you see a tes there, and then nyktos or nuktos. So in the vision of the night, or in a vision of the night. And then we have a chi here, a lot of chis. And then idu, notice there's a double dot here, an umlaut or a diaeresis here. That's functioning basically as a rough or a smooth breathing mark. So, and behold, then we have epi, upon, tone. And then you have an N-E, nice big phi there with a big ascender and descender, nephe, and we got to finish that here in a second. So upon the nephe something, and he just continues on the next line, we got lone, upon the clouds. Now, when we come back to Daniel 7, when we see Daniel 7 being quoted in the New Testament, we actually have 3 different options for this preposition, this epi. Sometimes it's in, sometimes it's meta, and so there's a bit of diversity in the different readings in the New Testament, and part of that is related to the Proto-Theodosian form, but the Old Greek form has epi. So upon the clouds, and then to uranu. So you see the O plus upsilon, rho, alpha, N-O-U, N-O-U. So upon the clouds of heaven. And then we have the verb. It begins with that lengthening on the front end with the ercheta, continues on the next line. So, was coming. And then we get this very interesting word here, hos. Someone who is as, huios, son, anthropou, the one who is as a son of man, which is a nice reflection of the bar anash that's in the Aramaic, the son of man, or kabar anash in the Aramaic. So one as a son of man. So it's not a title. It doesn't have the article like it does in the Gospels, but you see it setting that trajectory for the Son of Man in the Gospels. Now, this verse is where it gets really, really interesting. So we start with a kai, and then we have a hos yet again. And then let me erase some stuff so you can see it. Paleos, hemero, and then this is the new bar here at the top. So this is technically an N. This is what it looks like. So kai hos paleos hemeron. We would translate that as, or like the Ancient of Days. So hold that thought. We're going to come back to that here in a minute. Next line, parain, which is from parami. So he was present as the Ancient of Days. And then kai, we have a hoi parestekates. So you see how that continues. The ones who were standing around, that is the angelic retinue, prosegagon alto. This is a form of prosago. You see the agog, that's the aorist form. So they led, the ones around him were sort of presented before him, that is the Ancient of Days. So this is a very important verse where the Son of Man is coming, upon the clouds, and something's going on here with this host. So let's kind of double click on this. If you look at the Göttingen edition, which we did some videos earlier, the editor there, Ziegler, changes this word. In fact, all Greek manuscripts that we have of the Old Greek have the hos. He changes it to heos because in the Aramaic, the Son of Man is presented something like before or in the presence of the Ancient of Days. We knew that Theodotion has the hos, but when we discovered Papyrus 967, we also see that that is the oldest reading as well, this hos paleos hemeron. And so what's really notable about that is that at some point very early in the tradition history of Daniel, the idea that the Son of Man is presented in the presence of the Ancient of Days, which is pretty clear, or before the Ancient of Days, which is pretty clear from the Aramaic. So far, so good. In the Greek tradition, you have, in a sense, a merging of identities in some sense, or at least a blurring of the lines, where you have a Son of Man, but he appears as the Ancient of Days. And that actually carries forward into Revelation 1, where when John, that's why I wrote John there, when he describes this Son of Man in Revelation 1, he describes him with the attributes of the Ancient of Days. Jesus as the Son of Man looks like the Ancient of Days does in Daniel 7. So really interesting variant there. In fact, the Rolfs does include the host because that, in my opinion, is the correct reading for the Old Greek. It's interesting that the Göttingen edition basically thinks that that was some sort of later Christian correction. He thinks that the original was actually heos, even though there's not a lot of Greek evidence for that. So interesting stuff from Pete 967. We're going to come back to it next time and take a look at some of the interesting stuff with respect to Ezekiel. But hopefully this has been a fun introduction to a very, very important early manuscript of Greek Daniel as well as Ezekiel. But stay tuned for that next time.